Okay, guys, we're going to get started a hair early because if you know any of my presentations or if you know any of Novaline's, we cannot keep our presentations in the time limit because there's just so much information out there. So anyway, I'm Charlene Manning. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a master gardener, and of course, and actually I'm Novaline and I both are the original. We were in the first class of Master Gardeners, which is coming up on 20 years next year. So anyway.
And one of the others is next month.
Yes, yes. So anyway, just to kind of give you a little background, birds are kind of my passion. So so when this subject came up, I jumped on being able to do this presentation. Novaline kind of wanted to stick more. Y'all know she's a biology teacher, or retired. She wanted to kind of stick more with, you know, the what would you call it? The Scientific, thank you, Tom. I wanted to stick more with the fun and feeding the birds. So my part of the program is going to be feeding birds. I venture off of it just a little bit. I hope we don't run in to the same thing, but if we do, it doesn't hurt to hear it twice. So anyway, I also just want to apologize ahead of time. I have pictures of all these birds somewhere. I don't know where. I used, I'll tell you when they're my photos, but horribly, I used internet photos, and I kind of apologize for that because I do have, but I don't know where they are in my computer or anywhere. So anyway, we're going to go ahead and get started. So why should we feed birds? So the best part of bird feeding is bird feeding, watching, is with nature. It is the closest that you can get to wildlife without harming their, like, keeping them wild. Like, you know, you're not humanizing them to where, like, feeding a deer, you can never trust the deer will never be able to go back in the wild again. So, but with feeding birds and observing birds, you can get pretty close to them and still keep them wild where they're safe in their environment. There's 3 types of feeders out there. How many of y'all first feed the birds now? Okay, good. So some of this may be redundant. So there's 3 types of seed feeders. There's the hopper, the tube, and the globe. And the hopper is the most friendliest feeder, and it's also the most used, and it helps keep seeds dry. The tube is mostly, which this one is the tube, that's considered the hopper. The tube feeder is mostly for, well, you can put peanuts in a tube and feed them, but when you think of a tube feeder, you mostly think of thistle when you're feeding the goldfinches, which that's what this tube feeder is right there. And the globe, I could not find a picture of the globe, but the globe is basically what it says. It's a bowl and then has a plastic lid that kind of comes on top of it that protects the seed, but it doesn't close down on top of it. There's space between the bowl and the lid for the birds to fly in and fly out of. The best type of feeder, okay, this is my opinion. The best type of feeder is a feeding station. And I couldn't get a good picture either of what I consider a good feeding station. This is just on a shepherd's hook. And I like the feeding stations that are like 4x4s put in the ground and you hang, because then they're squirrel proof, raccoon proof, and all of that. These, especially a raccoon, can bend those things over and get what. But anyway, so this is, so the feeding station, what it allows you to do is feed different types of seed to different types of birds, because not all birds eat the same seed. So therefore, and not all birds feed at the same height. So if you have a feeding station, you can have different types of feeders, place them in different heights, and then that way you attract a more variety of birds that way. I think these are siskins, I think, on this. It's kind of hard to tell on this feeder. Is that what you think? That's what I think they are too. So they mostly come in and they're going to eat thistle for the most part. And we'll talk about them briefly in a little bit. But okay, the best time of year to start feeding birds all year. I feed birds all year long. Now, what you're going to kind of find is sometimes they're going to be at your feeder, you know, and just eat up whatever you put out in one day. Other times of the year, they're going to fly in and kind of fly out. And then other times of the year, you may not find that your birds are there at all. And depending on the time of year that it is, depends on if they're relying on seeds or if they're relying on berries. I mean, they eat other things than just berries. So they may be in a berry mode and eating mostly berries, and you may not have a lot of birds certain times a year or when the berries get ripe. So, but it's good to feed them all year long. Birds do not totally depend on bird feeders for food, which to me, when I read that was because I used to panic, you know, if I was going to be out of town or if I was busy that day and couldn't make it out to the feeders, I would just worry about my birds. But they don't totally rely on you. It's just what you feed them is a supplement to their regular diet. So that way you don't have to feel so bad if you go out of town or something and the birds don't get fed. Don't worry about them. They're going to be okay. Bird seed suet does supplement their diet. We'll talk about suet in just a minute. And I thought this was a very interesting fact. Chickadees that use feeders have a winter survival rate of 95% compared to the 87% in the wild with no feeders at all. And I don't know if y'all remember if y'all were feeding the birds during Snowmageddon when that happened. I had birds killing other birds to get to the feeders because there were just so many. I mean, they weren't attacking, but they would get in there so crowded and suffocate one or whatever. But I had some bird fatalities at the feeder when both those freezes happened a couple of years ago. Okay, the types of seed. There's black oil sunflower seeds, there's gray striped sunflower seeds, there's mixed bird seeds, and cracked corn. There's other fews, but that's just few things, but that's mainly what. I mostly feed the black oil. I have found that that's what they like the best. And the mixed bird seed that has the mullet in it, mine won't touch it. It goes to waste. They won't have anything to do with it. So I just invest. I buy it 50 pounds at a time at the feed store. And it's just, it can be, it's gone up. So it's a little bit expensive. But, you're also enjoying it. So you got to kind of remember that too. If it's one of your favorite pastimes, it's, no different than buying a yard of material if you sow. So, just kind of keep that in mind when you invest in birdseed. But the reason why the black oil is so popular is its shell is thin. And so your birds that have longer beaks and stuff can crack that open easier than they can the gray striped sunflower seeds. They're a little bit thicker. Also, the black oil sunflower seeds have 70% meat in them to where the gray stripe does not. Cracked corn, I'll use chicken scratch I use it in my suet, and I use chicken scratch on the ground as just a filler so to speak, I guess. I don't put chicken scratch or crack corn in my feeder. It's on the ground. You need to feed that on the ground and not the mixed bird seed. Like I said, it usually contains mullet. They don't. Now up west, the birds like it. Here, they do not, and they're not going to eat it. No sense in. And when you buy it, like at Brookshire's or somewhere like that, if you look in the sack, that's what it mostly is. And then you just see a black oil sunflower seed here and there in there, and you're just going to end up wasting. Invest in the good stuff and just do it. You'll be much happy, and you will draw better birds. Like in the city, my parents lived in Houston, and generally for Christmas, that's what I did for my parents. I would buy them several 50-pound bags of sunflower black oil sunflower seeds, because my dad would invariably buy the mullet because it was cheaper. Well, guess what he drew in? Doves, grackles, and so here we don't really have that problem, but you're going to draw in birds that you really don't want with it also. Every once in a while, I'll kind of go to Tractor Supply and get the medium-sized bags that has like dried fresh fruit and all of that mixed in with it. Mostly during the winter is when I'll do that to kind of add a little something different, but you can't afford that in a 50-pound bag. Okay, a thistle feeder. I don't have, okay, up there a picture. Thistle is, does anybody feed the goldfinches now? Okay, oh, that's something y'all need to do. And it's almost time. November is when they'll start. Or I get mine the middle of November and they leave about the middle of February. But it's, and the feed store used to carry thistle seed. I haven't bought any. I didn't buy any from there last year, but they have in the past had it. But it's a little black seed. It comes from Africa and Asia, and it's just a little thin, long black seed. And you feed it in a tube feeder, which I have a picture of it later on. And you want to draw the goldfinches in. Now you'll have, I don't know if you've ever noticed, you'll have 2 or 3. They do eat black oil sunflower seeds, and you may have 2 or 3 come in, but if you want 20, 30, 40 of them, you need to feed them in the, I have a sock feeder is what I have. And sometimes I have to, and it's a double one, and sometimes I have to fill that thing up once a day. Because every day, because you'd be surprised how fast they can go through that little seed. Did you have a question? Thistle. It's a sock feeder. A Tractor Supply has them. Well, I'm going to learn this yet. Okay, tips for clean feeders. Now, if you're going to feed the birds, you need to do it right. Just like if you're going to feed the hummingbirds, you need to do that right too. And you've got to keep that stuff clean. It needs, because you're going to, the finches have an eye disease that they get when you don't keep your feeders clean. So if you're going to go to the trouble of feeding them, you do need to keep your feeders clean. And so you can, on hanging feeders, when you go to put more seed in there, I always just shake it, and then I take it out in the pasture and hit it on the ground. It gets a little compact, and especially I feed open. I find for me, I like the open feeders. You weigh seed, and it does compact a little more, but I just feel like I have better luck with the open feeders. And I just hit it on the ground, and then scrape it with my nails. Every 2 or 3 times I change, depending on how hard it rained and what it looks like, that I will spray them down real good with the water hose and clean. But so you can tell when it needs to be a deep cleaning, or you can just get away with just getting the old bird seed out of there by shaking it off. Clean feeders, you can clean them by soaking them in a bleach and water solution, 1 part bleach to 9 parts water. Rinse and dry thoroughly before refilling. There again, you'll know when, okay, this thing needs, especially if mold is growing, you need to clean it with the bleach solution. Something a lot of people don't, to me, until I started feeding the birds, I never thought, well, what do you do with you get an accumulation of hulls down there, and it's like, oh, I didn't even think of that. So you do need to rake up and remove the accumulated hulls under the feeders. So depending on, one of my feeders is kind of, it's in the backyard that we don't use very much. I just go out there with the rake and spread it out, just rake it and just spread it on out. One of my other feeders is more or less in my flower bed area, and a lot of times I take a broom and a dustpan, and you can kind of sweep the holes, but you're going to need to clean those holes up. Another thing is if you have a bird feeder directly in your flower bed and you're feeding the black oil, sunflower seeds, a lot of things won't grow under. So one time I was actually feeding in a flower bed, and I mean, nothing would grow underneath there or kind of around it. So kind of keep that in mind too, of where you put your feeders at. So a no-brainer, wash your hands after handling and cleaning feeders. You don't want to pick up anything that, I don't know, what bird diseases, Novaline? Yeah, yeah. Am I going too fast? Okay. Okay, placement of bird feeders, where to place your bird feeder, where you can easily see the birds. You want to be able to enjoy them. I have my bird feeders strategically placed where if I'm doing dishes in the kitchen or sitting in my chair on the porch, I've got a good eye view. I've got the other feeder placed that if I'm sitting in my chair in the den, I have it faced where I can see them and enjoy them while I'm having coffee in the morning or in the evenings or whatever. So, place it where you're going to enjoy watching them. Away from window dangers. Remember, they need shelter for quick cover and prevailing winds. So you want to make sure where you place your feeder that they can do a quick getaway. That there's a tree limb or something close to where they can fly real quick off to. They get startled really easily, and you want to make sure, if it's in the wide open space, they're not, of course, that may be your only option, but if they've got a tree branch near or something to where they can make a quick getaway if they feel like they need to. On the prevailing winds, I mean, that's kind of obvious. You don't want your feeder swinging in the wind. And ease of filling, that's how when you pick out your feeder, that's something else you need, because you're not going to fill it up if it's too hard to fill up. So you want to pick out a feeder for you that is easy to fill up. And I know that I'm fixing to say an impossible request. Keep your cat indoors. And I know that that's probably, especially for y'all that have barn cats that keep the mice and stuff, it's cat and birds do not mix. And so just know that. And them cats can hide in places and jump up. I had a cat one time that would hide in, I had some Stella, well, I still do, Stella daylilies behind my bird bath. She would hide in there, and she literally could jump from the ground up and just grab a bird in midair taking a bath. And do if you can, keep cats Cat's away, although that cat looks kind of cute. Okay, storing your bird seed. That's another, you need to be sure to store it in a good dry place. So select a location once again near where you're going to feed, because you're going to be walking back and forth often. One of the things I kind of do to keep the squirrels kind of at bay is I just feed enough for one day. Now, it doesn't bother me. That's part of my coffee drinking and walking my flower beds in the morning is I walk out, feed the birds, walk my flower beds or whatever. So to me, I get enjoyment out of filling them up. But I keep my bird seed in a metal garbage can. But I do have it close enough where it doesn't, I don't have to go very far to fill my feeders up. So remember, you're going to be going back and forth often. And there again, easy to clean. You're not going to keep it clean if it's not easy to do. If it's a lot of trouble to keep it clean, you're not going to do it. Out of the reach of wildlife, deer, raccoons, squirrels. I have mine inside the pump house because my raccoons learned to open up the top of the garbage can. No matter how hard it was down on top, they got to where they could open it. So I just moved it. And so away from human food, you don't necessarily, your bird seeds, depending on how long it sits, it may get grain, flies and gnats and all that. You don't want that near your human food where those type of insects are going to get inside your human food. And there again, keep it in a cool, dry place. A metal trash can really is your best option for storing bird seed. Another very important component that while feeding the birds is water. And they need a water source. This is one of my pictures, and I know you probably can't tell it, but these two you don't see together very often. And that is a summer tanager, not a cardinal, and then that's a male bluebird. So I just thought that was really a rarity of. And you have to sit hours and hours and hours to get some of those kind of pictures. But anyway, a bird bath is the most important ingredient in attracting birds because their water source may be a little bit scarce than their food source may be. Bird baths don't need to be fancy. A shallow dish will do. Bird baths water level needs to be shallow. So it doesn't need to be any deeper than their kind of what you would call their knees. Belly high is too high. They're not going to get in it if it's belly high. So they like just shallow water. I have rocks in the middle of mine and that's a good thing if you have a traditional bird bath. That way you've got, again, different levels, so different birds can, the size of birds can bathe at different levels there. The bottom needs to be rough and not smooth, so that way they can kind of have a good grip on the bottom. And various rocks gives birds places to perch. Birds do not fly well when they're wet. So that's why they hurry up, take a bath, and fly off. And if you'll notice, they'll always fly they don't really fly far away. They fly as close as they can to the nearest limb so that they can, start drying. So that they can, so that they can, because they do not fly well. During the that I think it was the 2008 drought, I believe, 2011 drought. Anyway, that last really bad drought we had where everybody's tanks dried up. We were trying to save our water, but I would go without water so that my bird bath could at least have some water in it. So I shared my consumption of water with the birds. So one day, I had quite a few birds in the bird bath, and I was sitting on the porch watching them. And I mean, all of a sudden, the birds just disappeared. Well, I mean, the way they all of a sudden disappeared, I'm like, oh, well, there's a hawk in the area, you know. That a big old hawk flew into our yard, landed in that bird bath, and just sat there and did not move. And I was sitting there, oh, I've got to get a picture of this, but I knew there was no way I could get up, go get my camera, get it set, and get the picture and get a picture of it. So I just decided I was just going to sit there and have the memory of it rather than get up and miss the whole thing trying to get a picture of it. But that hawk just sat there in that bird bath for the longest. I guess he was I don't know that he ever drank it. I think he was just hot and he just sat in the middle of it. But anyway, it is good to offer water to birds. Okay, suet. Anybody? All right. Do you buy or make? And they eat it. See, my birds, I spoil them. My birds won't touch bought suet, won't touch it. It just sits there. But it's really easy to make, and you have several recipes in your handout that I have on making suet. And two of my favorite are the first two on one of those. I put, let's see. And I do have packages of suet for you to take if you're interested. One is the raisin oat loaf bread, and the other one's suet for success. Do y'all see that on one of those handouts? It should be on the first. Yeah, recipe for success and raisin oat cake. That's what these two are that I have. Now, I ran out of the raisin oat cake, so I just put two of the ones that looks like peanut butter fudge. But if you start making it from scratch, I'm telling y'all, they will go. I mean, I say my birds, but the birds that visit me will come and holler at me when especially the woodpeckers. I have a red-bellied woodpecker that will let me know when it is time. And if I don't get up fast enough, the louder he squawks at me. But it's really easy to make your own suet. And actually, it's a lot of fun to do it, I think. I don't know, but just as a master gardener or a gardener, how important it is to label your plants. Be sure you label your suet. Our friends and stuff that come over know well enough now that if they see a pan sitting on the countertop, they ask me, is this human food or is it bird food? We have one of our friends that actually cut a piece of this off and ate it because he thought it was a snack cake. So be sure you label if you decide to make homemade suet, you label it. I keep it in the freezer. I put it in a gallon Ziploc bag and keep it in the freezer. And then when I get ready for it, I just pull it out and use it. I'm telling you, they will. I go through it so fast. Mine's never lasted 2 months in the freezer. So all that's in it is peanut butter, cornmeal, oatmeal, and that kind of stuff. So like I said, mine doesn't last long enough too. Now, when you first start feeding it, don't be surprised if it takes a little while. They're going to have to see it for 2 or 3 days, maybe even longer than that, and deem it safe before they go to it. So, just put out just a little bit, and you also need to put it in a suet feeder. Don't just, which Tractor Supply has those. They're the ones with but I think I'll have a picture. Oh, there it is right there. That's a red-bellied woodpecker, and put it in a suet feeder like that. Now, you're only going to feed suet during the cooler temperatures. Sorry, we live in Texas, and you know what? That suet will be melted on the ground within, and especially if you make yours, because you're using a softer, I don't know what they do on the store-bought ones to make them. I have no idea. But when you're making it yourself, it melts a lot faster and quicker. But it's mainly a winter and fall thing and that's when they really need it. So anyway, suet is a dense white fat around the beef kidneys. It is best to render suet before using it in a recipe. Now, you can go buy the beef fat from the butcher or any meat department or whatever. A lot of times they kind of get aggravated at you, but anyway, they will reluctantly sometimes get you some beef fat for you. You can put it in an onion skin bag and just use it straight like that. But if you're going to use it in a recipe, you need to render it first before you use it in a recipe. I use, and which is mostly what you have in your recipes, I use Crisco. I use bacon trimmings, meat drips. I have a coffee can, I pour it in, keep it in the freezer to have enough to make a recipe, but I mostly either use vegetable shortening, bacon grease, or and meat drippings. I tried to, has anybody rendered beef before? I don't know. I didn't have success with it, and I didn't like the way my house smelled when I was so anyway. Okay, some other foods for birds that you may uncommon, sort of, that you may not think that you can. Anybody have any questions on suet first? Okay. I strongly advise you to try it, even if you just buy the bought suet. They absolutely love it. So some other food for birds that you may not think about is acorns, bread, ants, cornmeal, bacon, eggshells, baked goods, fruit, berries, and peanuts. Acorns are high in protein, very high in protein for the birds. And ants, sometimes ants get, oh Lord, thank you, Novaline. You know what? I will just, anyway, let me just say the ants and the other birds have a bizarre behavior called anting. And the bird uses ants to take a sponge bath to wipe down its feathers, especially under the wings. Ant bodies contain formic acid, which acts like a natural pesticide to keep feather lice and mice in check. And birds also eat ants. So if you see ants in which I get them every once in a while in my feeder, it's okay, although I try to get them out, but the birds don't mind them. I would kind of pre-crack them. I guess I've never fed them acorns before. But Novaline, what would you?
Put them in the smash them.
Yeah.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah. I was just kind of giving y'all something else to think about. And before we go to all these others are kind of, okay, I get it. But on the baked goods, on cakes and all of that, no icing. You can do a butter cake or a bundt cake, but just no icing. Be sure that there's no icing. Just some common backyard birds real quick that You know, that's, in case y'all don't know your birds, that's a chickadee, red-breasted, woodpecker, downy, cardinal. This right here is one of my pictures. That's a rufous hummingbird. And I had a rufous that our other house for 3 or 4 years would come, which is not, well, they're getting more common, but they're not real common here. So, oh, and the titmouse. Oh, and the blue jay. We'll skip that. Bird accidents, window strikes being the worst of it. A good way to keep from window strikes is the film. Birds just don't see, they don't have glass in their world, so they see the mirage through and they just keep on flying. That's what happens. So try to put up window deals. Okay, baby birds, and then we'll leave it at this. Sorry, Novaline. I just wanted, leave baby birds alone. Notice I did it in capital black letters. If a baby bird moves too fast to catch it, it doesn't need your help. So do not help. You're supposed to let nature take its course. Now, I know you're not going to do it. So in your handout, I put directions on what to do if you find a baby bird and a recipe to feed baby birds if you're going. But also remember, it's against the law, and I got to tell you.
Do it.
So, but leave them alone. But just in case you can't, I did enclose that. Oh, we'll just, okay. A bird does not sing because it has an answer. It sings because it has a song. And so here is your tube. Here's the finches. This is the finches that you'll get in the winter. We only get goldfinches. That's the color that they are in the winter. They're more gorgeous in the summer, but that's the color that they are in the winter. And that's my tube feeder, sock feeder, whoever was asking, that's what it looks like. Okay. These should have been two separate. I knew.